With only a handful of games left, the PWHL playoff picture is coming into focus. Plus, we officially have an expansion team in Seattle. All of that and more coming up on today's Women's Hockey Report.
This is the Women's Hockey Report presented by Locked On NHL. Your weekly look at the world of women's hockey. From the PWHL to the international stage, it's the Women's Hockey Report on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What a great time to be a women's hockey fan, and we are going to talk about all of the buzz and excitement. My name is Erica L. Ayala alongside Rachel Donner. You're listening to the Women's Hockey Report, part of the larger Locked On Podcast Network, and of course, the Locked On NHL channel. Want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. All right, we know the PWHL back in action after World Championships. We had one expansion announcement. We were pretty sure we were going to get another expansion announcement. We did get that expansion announcement, and Rachel and I will talk all about that. But first, let's do a vibe check. Rachel, how you feeling?
I'm probably feeling about as good as CJ, Carly Jackson did. Man, like, just what a culmination of what feels like a multi-year effort by the fans of women's hockey to get her a game. Like,
I mean, and did not disappoint, because we all know what Carly Jackson can do, and we will definitely talk more about that. I'm feeling the love in the women's sports community overall. Gutted that I couldn't be in Seattle. However, I did have a great time at the ESPNW Summit where Jessica Campbell was there, and I'll give you some insights on what she had to say about PWHL Seattle, Rachel. But let's play that beautiful footage for the folks.
Seattle, Washington has a long history as a hockey town, and fans are eager to get inside Climate Pledge Arena to watch some of the best players in the world face off here today.
This is an area that is hungry for hockey and hungry for women's hockey. It's great to see the PWHL live in Seattle.
Now Keller across her path, and she scores!
This place is so energetic. They're full of so much life. They're going to love you. And this is the stage that you guys deserve.
Indeed, it is the stage that women's hockey deserves. PWHL Seattle official. Rachel, we saw Jessica Campbell at the end of that clip. Of course, she made history as the first ever full-time assistant coach with the Seattle Kraken. Although there have been some coaching changes, which I have talked about on Locked On Kraken, we are expecting that she will be retained. And again, you can check out Locked On Kraken, because I got a little bit of a scoop while I've been here in New York on that front. But what we've talked about with Jessica before, Rachel, is the reception that women's hockey has received at Climate Pledge Arena. We can go back to the rivalry series from a few years ago, where Climate Pledge Arena actually set at the time the attendance record in all of the rivalry series. And then I believe still, holds one of the highest attendance records, especially on the stateside rivalry series. Then you match that with the attendance that we saw at Climate Pledge Arena, the fact that the teams were able to practice at Kraken Community Iceplex. These are all state-of-the-art facilities, and those facilities will be the ones that this new team is able to use for their home games and for their practices, Rachel.
Yeah, that's what I think is cool about this Seattle expansion and differentiates it from the Vancouver one, right? Where we saw there was some support from the Canucks, but it wasn't a Canucks thing. Whereas in this case, it's at Climate Pledge. They're using the same practice facility. There's probably going to be some joint activity, marketing, everything around it. And I think that will only help the PWHL team. And I think that while it's incredible in Vancouver to have a primary tenant situation for that team there, where you get the priority, I think there is a benefit to the familiarity of going to Climate Pledge. We know that's where we go for hockey games, and I think that will help Seattle in its own way.
Yeah, it's huge to have CPA as the main facility, the facility here for home games. And, we've talked about this on the show. I've talked about it on Locked on Kraken. There was a lot of question because Samantha Holloway, who is basically, a part of the ownership group and mostly does a lot of the speaking for the ownership group, is expected to also put in that bid for the return of the Seattle Supersonics. And we can't imagine that they're playing anywhere else but Climate Pledge Arena. And even when we had Amy Shearer on the show, I asked her specifically about that. And she used the example at the time of Madison Square Garden. But I guess that, again, Sam Holloway, the Climate Pledge Arena team, the Seattle Kraken team are willing to make accommodations and figure something out regarding the schedule. And excuse me, I think that's fantastic. I will also say, again, because I am super geeked out about this. I've been wanting this for a really long time. And I spoke to Jessica Campbell when she was an assistant with the Coachella Valley Firebirds in the AHL. And at the time, we were, of course, our format is to do video podcasts on the Locked On Network. And she didn't want to go on video. And when I found out why, it's because she was in a space that was very new to Climate Pledge Arena and was very intimate for her, is the sense that I got. Climate Pledge Arena, when it was built for the Seattle Kraken to use, and then, of course, their affiliates come in training camp, built in a women's coaches locker room. One existed even before Jessica Campbell got there. And I loved that story. I was so grateful that she shared that with me. And to me, that speaks to the preparation of the ownership group of the Seattle Kraken when they redesigned Key Arena, now as Climate Pledge Arena, that they had the foresight. And it's not women coaches using the Seattle Storm practice or locker room area. There is a dedicated space on the hockey side. So in the arena, most arenas, are like a big oval essentially, or a circle. Right. And so the locker rooms for basketball are on one side, the locker rooms for hockey are on the other side. On the hockey side, there is a dedicated space that they built out for women coaches to have their own changing space and their own locker room. Of course, Jessica and the rest of the coaches still go in with the guys in the locker room before the game, after the game, at the intermissions. And Jessica, who is the one woman coach right now, has a dedicated space. And I love that she shared that again. I just thought that, to me, when you talk about the PWHL, this is one of the reasons why it just seemed like a no-brainer to come to Seattle. Not to mention, I have to give a shout out to Zoe Harris, Alicia Crank, and everyone at the Seattle Sports Commission, because even before the PWHL, before the PHF, when we're going back to the NWHL, the CWHL, there was a grassroots movement to advocate for women's hockey in Seattle. And I'm so grateful that they are part of this crop in this league as one of the first two expansion teams.
Yeah. And I think it just all makes sense, from the facilities that you're talking about to a natural geographical synergy with Vancouver.
Yep.
In terms of building a rivalry and the travel and everything. I think for the first expansion, this is what made sense. And I think that there are other cities that are worthy and deserving, and they will come. And I think that's important to note, that Indeed. It's not like there's a limit on these things.
Yeah. And, Rachel, you picked up on something from the official announcement. I have to admit, I'm just going to say this before we get into our next point. I was low-key, like, a little hurt, maybe. Like, I was in my feels when I woke up, and we talked offline. I've been sick, so I woke up a little later than usual on announcement day. And I was already an hour late to the party. Like, all of the announcements, all of the logos and assets were now officially, because some of them were already out there, but they were officially up for before the actual announcement. That's not what we saw at Vancouver. Even though we all knew
Nope.
it was coming, they still waited. But the press releases, like everything, all of these things went out before everyone even woke up to get to CPA that morning. I don't know. I felt some kind of way. And I was like, Erica, it's definitely your emo, your feels. It's fine. But I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah. I mean, I felt like it was good to have all those resources available for all of us before, as the announcement was happening. And I think it was the right thing to do. But I can see that, with the time zone and all of that, like having
Yeah.
it be a different thing. I also want to shout out Allison Lucan, who did a
Yes.
phenomenal
Oh my
job.
gosh.
First off, she's great at everything she does, but
Amazing. We
but it was
stand.
really cool to have her there, kind of being a master of ceremonies, so to speak.
And did so flawlessly, introduced Skylar Diggins, who came in with all of the energy. Everyone gets the acronym or, the letters a little jumbled. It's fine because looked flawless, curls were on fleek. The energy is what we were looking for there. But there was something that one of the men, also, I lost it when Todd Leibicki said, I mean, I'm the only white man and I love it. He's like basically saying that almost never happens when he's talking hockey. And I thought that was hilarious. But there was something that the mayor said, Rachel, that caught your attention.
Yes. Well, there was a note that it is the only city to have all 3 major women's sports leagues with a team in the city. And with the WNBA and NWSL in there, and I think that with the Seattle Reign, and I think, one might call it a gauntlet thrown down at New York in some ways, just because New York does have a team in all 3 leagues in the market, but technically 2 of them play in New Jersey. And I think that is kind of ticky-tack. And so as a New York resident, I feel like I need to go to bat for this market here. But that being said, I guess technically it's true.
I thought it was interesting when you put that note in because I absolutely 100% am down with the mayor because I have this conversation all of the time. No, New York does not have an NWSL team, never has. New York does not have a hockey team. They once did in Brooklyn, but they no longer do. I'm with it. Not only does he was talking about a city. So Seattle, yes, absolutely. In Seattle proper, because the Reign, they moved around, but now they're back and I love it.
Right.
All 3 teams play in Seattle proper. They play at major arenas in the city proper. And they're in the same city. They're in the same state. Miss me with calling a New York team
I get it.
team and they play in New Jersey. I've been on this tip, whether it's football, hockey, basketball. So I'm with the mayor. I'm with the mayor 100%.
Real estate is different here. I'll just say that.
I mean,
how
not
land
that much
works
different.
is very different.
Not that much
here.
different. It's 2 different states. Even the Statue of Liberty don't belong to New York anymore. So anyway, but either way, I mean,
well, that I can get behind because I've always thought it was in New Jersey. So.
Well, it used to things change. Apparently waterways change, redlining, all that things. But I mean, shade or not aside, we will be on opposite sides of the line on that. But I just think it's a great announcement. Again, I was definitely in my feels, but you're right. It made so much sense to wake up as a media member and have all of that ready to go. And it's just exciting. So similarly to Vancouver, we're rocking with PWHL Seattle for the foreseeable future. Just like Vancouver, they will start in the league next season. And so presumably, just like Vancouver, we will eventually get some details on how this Seattle team will start off its roster. But coming up, Rachel, we want to talk about what is now in the PWHL, because as exciting as expansion is, things are heating up when it comes to the standings. We've already alluded to some of that, but let's get into it on today's episode of the Women's Hockey Report. And today's episode, once again, brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. And did you know that Fire TV is also an Xbox? You can turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to go. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With 4K streaming, you have access to more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and so much more. Shout out to Paramount Plus because I work for CBS Sports. I'm just putting it out there. Anyway, you can also play high quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console. Already have a console? A Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take your your kids' favorite games wherever you plug in. So head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller are required. And you can find all of this available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K second generation, Fire TV Stick 4K Max first and second generation, and Fire TV Cube. All right. Thanks as always for joining us for the Women's Hockey Report. Erica Ayala alongside Rachel Donner here. We are your hosts with the most sassy, saucy, all of the feely things to say about women's hockey, which includes talking about last week. We knew it was a return to play. I mentioned that already, Rachel. We had some games. We had the ones that we were circling. And I think for the most part, the team, aka Ottawa, that we thought needed to step up, found a way to get a win, Rachel.
Well, yes and no, Erica, because they did manage to get that initial win against Montreal, which was important. And we knew that Ottawa was controlling its own destiny, and Montreal had already clinched a playoff spot. So, the opportunity was there, and they took advantage of it and got that first win. It was then the game that was my game pick for game of the week on Wednesday, where they got blanked by the Minnesota Frost. And that was for all the marbles right there. And we knew that. We knew that that was likely going to be the scenario. And to not even score in that game when all you had to do was win. All you had to do was get it done. And Minnesota took them to the woodshed, honestly, in that second game. That's a returning champion, right? They know how to step it up in the key moments, and they did, because they were fighting for their lives as well. This is it. And this is a winning team that knows how to get it done. And they did. And as we have talked about, ad nauseum, Ottawa has been an inconsistent team. And I don't necessarily think they played horrifically. They just didn't step it up at all in a way that you need to. And so, it's hard to say exactly why. Now, of course, with all that pressure from Minnesota, at least Sekline gets 2 goals in that game for Minnesota.
Friend of the pod.
Great performance. Yeah. from her again. And, you always have to ask, did Ottawa lose or did Minnesota win? It was probably a little bit of both, to be honest. But yeah, it's just, it's rough because, they did get that big win against Montreal, and, big first game back for Gwenneth Phillips after, coming in relief in Worlds, 2-goal game for Ashton Bell, who was a surprise hero there. And then just to have that letdown in the game against Minnesota, that was rough. That was real rough.
I mean, and let's keep it a buck. Minnesota kind of had the same scenario. They,
Yeah.
not in a head-to-head, which again, we're gonna talk about that. And I don't think anyone's gonna be surprised by our game of the week pick here coming up later on the show. But Minnesota also couldn't get a win against a team that had already been eliminated before the puck even dropped. The New York Sirens able to outlast and shut out Minnesota. And although the head-to-head obviously was the important game for a lot of different reasons, that was another opportunity on the table for Minnesota even before they got Ottawa.
Yeah, it is interesting. Now, obviously, I feel like the Sirens are just playing with a level of freedom now that they did not have in that game, especially. I think they were just like, well, this was a game we had to win to stay in, and we're going to play as though we are still in this playoff race. And I think, you look at the other game they had, it took a shootout in the game
Yeah.
against Toronto later. Like, they're just playing. It's such a shame in a lot of ways, but they are playing with just a level of abandon that I think works to their advantage, especially with the talent that they have. And, obviously now with these expansion drafts, no team is going to look the same next year in any way, but I just think it's fun to watch this new version of the New York Sirens right now.
For sure. In that game that we were just talking about against Minnesota, I can't remember if it was the second, maybe the third period. I think it was the second period, Rachel, where right before one of their goals, they just kept Minnesota hemmed into their zone, and they were able to just keep the puck, recollect, recycle, and then find a way to get to the goal. I mean, shout out to El Harchi and of course Jesse Eldridge, both friends of the pod we've had on the show, and excuse me, Jesse in particular talked about that. She's like, absolutely not, no team tank. We know that the league obviously has a rule, the gold plan, to set that up so that that's not really a thing, or you don't have an incentive, at least after you've been eliminated anyway, to tank. But there's also pride, and I think that's exactly what you're talking about. There's that freedom, there's the pride. We heard from Elle that even though the puck hasn't been bouncing, so to speak, their way, obviously missing Alex Carpenter for a while, that was tough. But this team, the vibes are good. The vibes are good in New York, and you're starting to see that. So I guess the question, though, becomes if the skill is there. And I think we've always believed that was the case. We talked so much about Corrine Schroeder, but we're also seeing other people step up, role players step up, which we love. Then is it maybe more of a systems thing? I've had questions about things in the front office for this team before they were officially the New York Sirens, who play in New Jersey. But anyway, that's something to consider. We talk so much about Carla McLeod because, that just seems like an obvious thing to talk about. But are there other coaches or maybe even executives where it's like, hey, when you have the top pick, are likely going to get another top pick here, right? Because no one else has been eliminated mathematically, Rachel. So they have collected the most points to date, and that should guarantee a top spot. So are you going to have people who can build this team and then coach this team to success? I think that's something we're going to have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some changes across the league, and especially with expansion, and maybe somebody from an existing team will move to an expansion team in an executive role or a coaching role. Like, all bets are off, in my opinion. I think a lot will change.
Absolutely. Well, we wanted to talk about New York and, of course, Minnesota and Ottawa because there's a lot of clawing happening towards the bottom of the standings. But if we work our way to the top, as you might have heard in Dreamgirls, if we work our way to the top and we see that Toronto able to officially clinch, and oh my goodness, you mentioned it earlier, Carly Jackson, aka Uncle Siege, love to see it on Pride Night, able to not only get a start, not only get a win, but get it in an overtime shootout, Rachel. I got chills once again just talking about it with you here on the podcast.
Right. And that's one of the benefits of clinching a playoff spot is you get to maybe give some players some opportunities who wouldn't have otherwise, because you're not in a must-win situation. And yet they still won. And that's what I love about it. And that's what I love about this Toronto team. I think that they were able to bounce back from losing. Like, they clinched the playoff spot despite losing that game to Boston earlier in the week. And I think that's what it's going to take to win the league this year. I think there's, a lot of teams that have had some inconsistencies, and you got to pounce on it. And I really think Toronto is a team that's looking to be able to take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we know that they had such a great run, a surge last year on the back of Natalie Spooner. Didn't work out with them picking their opponent, but nope. We'll see what happens this year with that, and what kind of strategy goes into it this year. Because I mean, right now, right, Rachel, that's still up for grabs whether it's going to be Montreal or Toronto officially, because we're waiting for how everything will fall when it comes to the final standings. But so that was the week that was, Rachel. Let's talk about the final week of the season coming up on today's episode of the Women's Hockey Report.
The Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and if you've never been to a live NHL playoff game or a PWHL playoff game for that matter, it is unlike anything else. With playoff hockey, you get the intensity to the speed and the energy in the building, and it is next level. Thanks to Game Time, getting in that door is easier and more affordable than ever. Game Time is the fastest way to grab those playoff tickets, even for those must-see matchups, and prices actually drop as puck drop gets closer. With last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% for sports, concerts, comedy, and my personal favorite, the theater. They're all in pricing. It shows the total cost up front. There's no surprise fees at checkout. The app even shows you panoramic seat views, so you know exactly what you're getting into before you buy. And with Game Time ticket coverage, I know I'm protected, whether it's cancellation protection, a job loss assurance, or their 24-hour return guarantee. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
All right, we got to take care of some business because the season is winding down. We have a triple header, and decisions, or I should say these games will decide who officially goes to the playoffs and what the standings will be. So we have, as I mentioned, 3 games on tap for today. Ottawa at Toronto, Minnesota at Boston, and Montreal at New York. The standings as of right now, the top 2 teams, Montreal and Toronto, in that order, have officially clinched a spot in the playoffs. Rachel, we've already mentioned the New York Sirens are in 6th place. They've been mathematically eliminated. Will not be playing on after this weekend. But then you have Boston, Ottawa, and Minnesota in that order. 44 points for the Fleet, 42 points for the Charge, 41 points for the Frost. So let's talk about scenarios. What do fans need to know heading into the games this afternoon?
Well, what's interesting here is that it's not just clinching playoff spots that's up for grabs. It's the placement. And then who's going to get that home ice advantage, who's going to get to pick their opponents, and all of that is up for grabs because the Scepters are within 3 points of Montreal and could conceivably overtake them for first place in the league overall, given the tiebreakers that are out there with regulation wins. So in terms of the clinching scenarios, Ottawa, again, still has their destiny in their own hands. In order to get to the playoffs, they have to win in regulation or overtime against Toronto on Saturday, who, like I said, is now battling for that first overall spot. So they've got incentive there. It's not going to be a cakewalk. They can rest people if they want, but there is absolutely incentive there for them. Now, the other option for Ottawa is for Minnesota to lose its final game against Boston. But again, Boston wants that higher placement as well and to officially clinch, because they need at least 1 point against Minnesota in order to clinch, right? So they have the easiest path of anybody here because they've got multiple options that don't involve them here. But, if Minnesota wins, against Boston in regulation, they automatically clinch. So, there's a lot of moving pieces and parts in terms of the clinching and the placement in the standings. And it's incredible that all 3 games that are overlapping each other will have an impact this weekend.
Yeah, and I like, honestly, the last games of the season overlap. I say that as someone who covers the WNBA, because this is actually something that the coaches talked about several years ago, and they wanted to have multiple games, as many games happening at the same time, so that teams couldn't then look at standings or look at the games prior to their tip-off and then kind of finagle, oh, if we throw this game, what does that look like? Things of that nature. So it is definitely chaotic. And I think that it also is highly entertaining. At least that's how I see it. Now, scheduling, we definitely have to have all of our screens active. That's the tough part from the fan perspective. However, I think the drama and the storylines that it presents are extremely exciting. And all of these games matter, which I think is pretty cool. And as you mentioned, Rachel, the question is, can Ottawa get it done? I do want to note that, you mentioned that Toronto had already, clinched. And so that's, we get to see CJ and just that fantastic performance. But we did hear from Troy Ryan that apparently that was going to be the plan either way, regardless, to get CJ that game. I'm just reporting what was said. If that was the case or not, we'll take him on good faith. And I also just want to note that, unfortunately, Carly Jackson has had this happen before. I have interviewed Carly several times, CJ, throughout their professional career. It happened with a stacked Toronto team when they were the Toronto Six that ultimately won the last ever Isabel Cup title. And the way that CJ approaches the work, they get so much respect from their coaches and from their teammates. You saw just the gratitude. And so I just wanted to note that. So I think that also speaks, though, to the depth that this Toronto team can throw. We've seen injuries before. Sarah Nurse has been out. Natalie Spooner has been out, and other players have stepped up. So, as you mentioned, there's incentive for Toronto in this game. Can Ottawa get it done? I mean, of course, the answer is yes, right? The real question is, will they? Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the real question. And when you put these two teams toe-to-toe, I definitely give the advantage to Toronto. Obviously, they are the higher team in the standings, but I wanted to tell those stories because I think it leans to the depth. They've persevered last season and this season through inconsistency, but played their true game at all times, even when things weren't really working out. And that is not what we see from Ottawa. It's the inconsistency with Ottawa that tends to be their Achilles heel. And so when you have two teams that's kind of their storyline and narrative coming into this, putting the standings aside, I think you have to lean into Toronto winning this game, all things being equal, which again, they aren't.
I know. And that's the thing. It's really unfortunate, I think, from an Ottawa perspective, because they've had every opportunity and they haven't gotten it done. And so the assumption has to be that they won't get it done. I mean, prove us wrong, please.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's kind of the assumption you have to have going into it, which, again, very sad.
It is sad. For the Ottawa fans that are ready to cancel us, I will offer you this. I will offer you this. They are inconsistent. And so they lost their last game, Rachel. So inconsistency would tell us that they would then win their next one.
Maybe.
I mean, okay, jokes aside, I think what we're saying here is that Both teams have to step it up, really lean into their skill set. You have to, though, get some scoring from some of your key players, but also some of your role players if you're Ottawa, because we know Toronto can do that. They've proven that time and time again. And so that's what Ottawa has to do. Can Gwenneth Phillips steal a game? Absolutely. Absolutely. Should she have to? I mean, the answer might be the same because of this Ottawa team. And so does it come down to goaltending? I think that's going to be really interesting. I think I've kind of shown my cards, Rachel. That's my pick for game of the week. Because I just think that there's so many different versions of Ottawa that we can see, and there's so many different assets from Toronto that we can see. So what are you thinking? Are you agreeing with me, or are you going a different direction for game of the week?
I mean, I'm going to have a cop out and just pick all day because every game has implications.
Yeah.
Every game is going to be fun. At least for New York, that we know it's going to be their last game to show out. So why not topple Montreal in your last game of the season? Like, why not?
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a fun afternoon no matter what. And I'm looking forward to all three.
Okay, let's do a little bonus here. Who do you think gets the top seed, and who do you think gets booted from the playoffs? What's your pick as of our recording, Rachel?
I think this is so hard because there's like a cascading effect of choices here. Because you know what? I think Toronto's going to win that game, but I also think Montreal is going to win the game. So I feel like Montreal will stay atop the standings, but Ottawa's going to get booted from the playoffs. I'm sad to say both of those things, but I think that's what we're looking at.
I agree with you with regard to Toronto for sure. It goes back to, though, what we were talking about with the Sirens, because they looked so good. I mean, I mentioned that very specific sequence. They've looked really good, and there's nothing like playing spoiler, and again, they already did what they needed to do to get the top draft pick. There's no one that's gonna get more points after elimination than them, because no one else is eliminated. So but I just don't think that that's gonna have the same impact as being able to be like, oh, so you could be number one. We're going to beat you on the last day of the season, the regular season. So I'm almost leaning towards the Sirens here. But I don't know. I if I'm being honest, I think I agree with you, though. I think Ottawa is going to be on the outside looking in. And yeah, it is tough to say. But, we saw what Minnesota had to do to fight and claw just to make the playoffs, and then they won the Walter Cup in the inaugural season. Toronto did not start well, and then they get that top spot only to then not be successful when calling out the team that they wanted to play. So I guess that's just my way of saying we have to just see how the games go tonight, Rachel, or today, I should say, throughout the day. Again, it's going to be Ottawa and Toronto. That's 12 p.m. Eastern time at 1 p.m. So these are overlapping start times. At 1 p.m., that's Minnesota at Boston. And then at 2 p.m. today, it is Montreal at New York. But that's going to wrap the Women's Hockey Report for this episode. By next episode, we will know who is in the playoffs, and we will talk about all of that. Before Rachel Donner, Erica L. Ayala. And hey, you're already on the Locked On NHL channel, so make sure you check out the Locked On NHL game night. Every game, every night, until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find game night on the Locked On NHL channel on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And hey, we have a new handle on TikTok, and it's not like 11 million different words. It's at women's_hockey_report. So if you want to support our specific show on the Locked On NHL channel, give us a follow on TikTok. Until next episode, Peace out, everybody, and enjoy the games this afternoon.
Oh my goodness.
I know. We made it. We made it through.